Epiphany is associated with a lot of traditions all over the world. I would like to highlight a few traditions that we can understand the meaning of this important solemnity. Now, when we think about this feast, the solemnity of Epiphany, we know that in our neighboring Mexico, they have a kind of celebration. The celebration is called the Fiesta de los Reyes Magos, and they distribute a type of cake prepared with chocolate and cream, and they believe that these three kings came not with horses or camels. They say they came with elephant, horse, and camel. So these three types of animals. And then in Spain, they celebrate it as the Fiesta de los Reyes. And on this particular day, children receive gifts. That's why the three gifts that were offered to Jesus in some way represent for them when they celebrate the feast, children receive gifts. And in Greece, there is a special type of celebration on this day. You know, the priest goes and blesses the water of a lake or a river or sea, and then he throws a crucifix into the water, and the faithful who can afford to swim in these cold waters during this season, they can go and retrieve this crucifix, and that's the kind of celebration they have. And then finally, I would like to elaborate on this feast in Italy, how they celebrate. It is said that when these three kings came passing through this country, that is Italy, they met a very devout woman who was a poor woman, but her task was cleaning the houses. And when these three kings asked about Jesus, she did not know about it, and then they went away. But then she offered these three kings wonderful hospitality. And she is called Befana. You might have seen a woman flying with a broom, that is Befana. And this woman later realized, oh, he is the king, I should have gone with them, because they had invited Befana to accompany them. But then she said no. And later she went in search of the kings, in search of the baby Jesus. And on the way, she started distributing gifts to children. That's why Italians always expect on this day, Befana will come to give gifts to the children. But there is a distinction. Good children will receive candies and cookies. Bad children will receive black coal, onions and garlic. Okay? So that is the tradition they receive, they celebrate in Italy. Now coming to the gospel passage difference, we have here the explanation of the wise men coming from the east. We do not have a particular number here. We never find in the gospel passage that there were three kings. Absolutely not. They said wise men came from the east. And what about the three gifts? The gifts can be given by multiple kings. According to tradition, they say perhaps there were 12 kings or 9 kings or 3 kings. We do not know. But there is no specific number here. Now, what is the meaning of this particular feast when we celebrate and apply to our life? Dear friends, the kings from the east were longing for God. All the religions for that matter, all over the world, irrespective of caste, creed and religion and language background, we all of us have a tremendous longing for the divine. Sometimes this longing is personal, sometimes it is translated into political. In the name of God, there is violence, there is war, but ultimately, each and every individual has in his and her heart a great longing, and that is why this particular feast is so important, that we all of us have that longing to meet the divine. And that is why these three kings start a journey. And what was this journey? Was it a pleasant one? Was it a difficult one? It was a difficult journey. Because they had to climb the mountains, go down into the valley. They had to traverse difficult terrains, perhaps even the desert. That is why our spiritual life is connected with all kinds of experiences of pain, sorrow, difficult moments. Sometimes we cannot pray, we find it difficult, hard to find God in our life, and that is why these ups and downs in our life, representing these three kings making this long journey from far east. Now, where they go? They go to Jerusalem. During that time, the religious center all over the world, the most important center was in Jerusalem. And that's why these people who wanted to find a religious significance, a king is born, they came to Jerusalem to inquire and find out where this king is born. And therefore they end up in the palace of Herod. Now who is Herod? Herod is a worldly man. He was not longing for God. He was longing for himself. He was filled with himself. And that's why the world is represented here in this person. A world of power, pleasure, lust, murder, violence, and whatnot. So Herod is representing a bad world. These three kings come to the palace of the king. And now, what do they find? Dear friends, when we go into the world, when we talk to people, we get a lot of ideas. Sometimes people take us away from God. Sometimes people instill in us a fervor for God. But we need to be very prudent like those three wise men. And how to be prudent? It is a kind of discernment. And that is why they heard everything from King Herod. He was totally troubled. Most probably he was frustrated, another king is born. And then what does he say? Go and diligently look for the child so that when you find him, come and report me so that I may also go and pay my homage. A very green lie. This Herod wanted to destroy the child. Sometimes when we meet people, dear friends, we have to be very prudent. We have to discern. When we listen to the theories of the people, sometimes people can instill in us bad kind of theories. And then once they heard, and they restart the journey. Now what happens here? If we keenly give attention to the gospel passage, when Herod was making inquiries through the chief priests and the scribes where the child would be born, there was no appearance of the star. Even the three kings did not see the star. And then, when they set out of the palace on their journey, the star reappears. And what we have to do in our daily lives? Dear friends, star is always a symbol of hope. In all our trials and temptations, difficulties, sins and difficult moments and sufferings, we should never ever take our sight from the star. And that is hope. Dear friends, a life without hope is desperation. That is why we find such a lot of desperation in the world. Because people do not have that hope. We have to fill ourselves with that hope. One day we will meet the King. We have to look at the star. And that's why Mary, Mother of God, is known to be the star of hope. And that's why we need to have this continuous looking at the star. No matter what is our life. Sometimes our life is difficult. Sometimes our life is pleasurable. We have success, we have failures. But we have no right to take our eyes from the star. Keeping it always on the star. And that gives us strength and courage. And that gives us also enthusiasm. Because this life is going to be ended one way or the other, whether we like it or not. But when we fix our hope on the star, we are always encouraged because there is something waiting for us. The star will lead us somewhere to the sure place and destination. And as they go, the star, as the Bible says, the star stopped on the place where Jesus was. They enter and offer him gifts of frankincense, myrrh, and gold. I would like to elaborate on that a little bit. In the life of Jesus, all these three gifts represent very strongly: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. What is gold? Gold is royal. Jesus was called to be king of the universe. So gold represents riches, wealth, happiness, contentment, joy. That is gold. In our life, there are golden days. We have to enjoy them. And there is a nice dinner and there's wonderful company. You have wealth and money and health. Your friends around. Enjoy. Now what about Jesus? Did he enjoy? Of course he enjoyed. All the time. Sometimes our Catholic Church portrays Jesus as always miserable and very sad. We portray him with crown of thorns, plenty of blood. He's a very sad guy. Absolutely not. Jesus was a happy guy. And that's why we find in the Bible always beautiful explanations about banquets after banquets. His parables were filled with banquets. And that's why he said, when I am sitting in my Father's home, I will drink wine. He drank wine with his disciples. Those were the golden days of the life of Jesus. And what about the following? What about the miracles? What about preaching and teaching? Wonderful experiences. The transfiguration. Jesus' triumphant entry into the city of Jerusalem. All this represents gold. And then frankincense, Jesus' continuous offering of sacrifice to the Father through his prayers. What was Jesus doing? All the time, early in the morning, late in the evening, at night, he used to go alone to pray. What are prayers? When we know that when we go to the temple in Jerusalem or to Vatican, and sometimes I put here incense, right? Frankincense. When I put incense, what happens? The smoke rises up. Symbolic of our rising of prayers to God. Every day we need to pray. We learn it from this particular gift. When we continuously are in touch with the divine, dear friends, we are again strengthened from within. The last gift is myrrh. The meaning is bitterness, pain, and sorrow. One thing is very clear. One day we will be embalmed with myrrh. I do not know whether in Canada they do it. In the Middle East they normally do it. Embalming the dead body with myrrh and spices. That is what they did for Jesus. Myrrh is bitter and medicinal. And that's why we understand that our life is always not going to be a bed of roses. There are going to be sufferings and pain and old age and sickness. Sometimes we will have straining relationship with our loved ones, difficult moments, poverty, defeats. That's a part of our life. So that symbolizes myrrh. Now traditionally we know that when we think about the wise men, we think of three kings. As I said, there is no specific number. But there is a tradition in the church that these three kings were Caspar, Balthasar, and Melchior. I would like to give you a short history why these three names came. Who knew those three names? It all came through a tradition. I am going to explain to you. Because in the tradition of the church right from the beginning, when they were celebrating Epiphany, it was connected with the baptism of the Lord. Now, baptism of the Lord this year does not come on a Sunday. It comes during this week. And next Sunday will be the second Sunday of ordinary time. But in many denominations and in many churches, they were celebrating Epiphany of the Lord with baptism. And the Protestants, practically they celebrate the manifestation of the Lord from Epiphany till Lenten season. So that's a long period of time of manifestation of the Lord, including also the transfiguration of the Lord. Now what they were doing, on the day of the baptism of the Lord, they were blessing holy water. Of course, we Catholics bless the holy water on Easter Sunday. But in those times, they were blessing the water on the baptism of the Lord, connected with the baptism water, Jordan. And this water was taken to bless the houses. And how they were blessing the houses? With a kind of clear statement. Christus bendicat mansionem, Italian expression. Christus bendicat mansionem. CBM. So in our houses, sometimes you might have seen, these beautiful plaques somewhere. God bless our home. Have you seen that? Lord bless our home. God bless our home. That comes from there. Christus bendicat mansionem. And they are associated with three names. Caspar, Balthazar, Melchior. That is the story of these three guys. That's why nobody knew the names of these wise men, but that is a tradition that has come to be practiced in the Catholic Church or in the tradition of Christianity. Now, what about the manifestation of the Lord to all the nations? We have heard in the first reading that rise, shine. The light of the Lord will come, the glory of the Lord will appear, the riches will be brought, the camels will bring frankincense and gold, your daughters and sons will come from afar, and there will be rejoicing and there will be thrill, and all the riches and wealth of the sea will come to you. Dear friends, from our part, what we can do, manifestation of the Lord is trying to manifest the Spirit of Christ in our daily lives to others. Whether we are talking to people, whether we are talking to our family members, our neighbors, there should be always, in some way, manifestation of Christ through our life. How can we do it? Jesus did it. Jesus was not only for the Jewish people. He was for Samaritans. He was for the centurion. He was for the tax collectors. He was for the Syro-Phoenician woman. That means Jesus was a man for all. That's why we should be people for all. We have to embrace humanity. And that is what we understand by this great solemnity, the manifestation of the Lord, which is called Epiphany. Kindly rise, we prophesy.